Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining this session. I hope you had a fantastic lunch and a nice break. So my name is Afton Halloran, and I'll be moderating today's breakout session on the future of HoReCa. So when we think about the future of food, often our minds turn to high-tech innovations that can improve the way we farm, or new products that can reduce the environmental footprints of our diets. But too often, we forget about the role of the HoReCa sector and its contribution to sustainable food systems. This sector represents the food service industry that consists of establishments which prepare and serve food and beverages. We're talking about hotels, restaurants, and catering. The COVID-19 pandemic that we know all too well, reminded us about how vulnerable this sector can be to external shocks. But at the same time, we've also seen how resilient the HoReCa sector can be as well, with swift adaptations being made to keep people employed, to keeping the food supply flowing in many cases. So even before the pandemic, we've also seen that this sector has faced a number of challenges and the need to undergo significant transformation in the face of environmental change, gender inequality, work-life balance, and changes to consumer eating patterns, to name a few. In other words, adaptation has been a key word in this sector. Over the next hour and 15 minutes, we're going to hear about the good practices that have been generated from a piece of co-creative work and how this can lead to change in the sector. And then we're also going to hear from 4 fantastic panelists representing different parts of the HoReCa sector. They're going to share with us their experiences and explain just how they're responding to challenges and opportunities, as well as how they're preparing for the future. So before we get started, I just want to say that one of our panelists, unfortunately, couldn't join us today. He runs a restaurant and something came up at the restaurant that he needed to tend to. So as I've said to everyone before this, I mean, we're talking about the HoReCa sector, a very dynamic sector, and these things do happen. So I'm sorry that we will have one less panelist, but nonetheless, we're going to have a fantastic discussion. But before we get to the panel, as I said before, we're going to have a presentation. We're going to hear first about the results of some research carried out during the pandemic on restaurants of the future. Together with other actors in the sector, this co-creative work looked into sustainable best practices in the HoReCa sector. And to tell you about this, I'm joined by Ewa Rajauska, a project manager at EIT Food, and Katarzyna Malojnik, and she's the founder of Handelek, a gastronomic concept in Poland. And she's also the co-founder of Rebread. It's a startup saving unsold bread from being treated as waste and transforming it into valuable products. So I'm going to hand the floor now over to Eva and Katarzyna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Afton. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to be here and have this opportunity to share with you some of the insights and conclusions from our recent project conducted in Poland, Direction Restaurant of the Future. I'm happy especially because today we launched the report that summarizes the study and the list of the sustainable practices identified during the project by participants, and it's available for downloading from EIT Food website. The project was aimed at supporting HoReCa sector with implementation of more sustainable and responsible practices, despite the disruptive times, and from the beginning engaged the representatives from the sector. Therefore, as Afton mentioned, in the second part of the presentation, I will give the floor to Katarzyna, who is one of the project participants. Next slide, please. As our food foresight on COVID-19 impact on agri-food sector showed, HoReCa segment proved to be the most negatively impacted by the pandemic and faced multiple challenges due to lockdowns. Restaurants often struggled to survive and had to change their working modes very quickly, transform the way they manage employees, work with the suppliers, prepare meals, or communicate with their customers. Next slide, please. For example, in Poland, in 2020, even 20,000 of food services establishments may have closed, and even 200,000 people lost their jobs or decided to change industry. And the whole market value fell more than 30% year to year. Next slide, please. We are experiencing ongoing changes. Among others, to the pandemic and climate change, we shifted to even more fragile, unstable, and unpredictable reality, which defines the context in which the food service companies will exist. On the other hand, soon food services will have to meet numerous legal requirements concerning greater sustainability. Also, we have new dietary recommendations like launched in 2019 Eat Lancet Commission's Planetary Health Diet, and moreover, awareness, expectations, and habits of consumers are changing too. They not only got used to new ways of consuming food or ordering it by switching to digital channels, but they are also more cautious about their health, diets, and they put bigger attention to the quality and origin of the products that they buy. The HoReCa is undergoing a major shift. Next slide, please. How can the sector implement sustainable and responsible practices? For example, more cautious food waste, plastic reductions, employee satisfaction increase, while facing crisis and all of its implications. Here you can see the quote from René Redzepi, the leader of, again, the best restaurant, according to the 50 best world restaurants ranking, who is also highlighting the need to change the way HoReCa works. If you're not aware, there is also the first restaurant guide 360, which is ranking the restaurants, taking into account, among other factors, also sustainability. Next slide, please. Direction Restaurant of the Future was a bottom-up project, engaging representatives of the sector ecosystem. From the very beginning, we cooperated with the Polish restaurateurs, chefs, suppliers, restaurant staff, producers, to better understand and investigate the status of the HoReCa branch, also including the pandemic time, and the existence of sustainable practices in the sector. The exploratory research was used as a base for the co-creative work of the HoReCa representatives to create the very first list of sustainable and responsible practices for the restaurant of the future. This set of practices shows how to implement more sustainable solutions and demonstrate a long-term benefits coming from them. It's also preparing the ground for the future dialogue and exchange of the experiences between the participants of the sector, which we also hope to do today during our following discussion panel. Next slide, please. Now I would like to briefly share some of the insights from the research part regarding Polish HoReCa sector approach towards sustainability, the opportunities and biggest challenges. Changing the mindset proves the most difficult, and the attitude of people in the industry often blocks change. Running a catering business requires from the owners to create and manage many elements of their businesses, from the character of the place, cuisine, to managing the staff. They feel they know everything about their businesses and about their work. The same goes to experienced chefs and managers. In general, people who have been working in gastronomy for a long time become a bit immune to new external knowledge. And these businesses often run their operation independently without external support nor advice. And this also makes them reluctant to share their knowledge, and in turn, they tend to treat it as their secret know-how. Chefs and restaurateurs, moreover, indicated lack of an active, bigger community, that could serve as a ground for exchange of professional experience, and when it comes to sustainable operations, obviously too. The pandemic showed that those restaurateurs who turned to be skillful in analyzing reality, flexible, courageous, quick, and effective in adapting to the new situation survived. And they also tend to be more open to implementing new solutions. However, when speaking about introducing new practices or solutions, they must take into account that changing employee habits requires a lot of commitment, educational activities, and extra time. People attitude and awareness just change slowly. And that's also challenging because I think like the biggest problem of the whole sector is facing now, especially after the start of the pandemic, is lack of workforce and lack of professionals on the market. Food service jobs are not seen as a professional career. Work in HoReCa requires a lot of sacrifice, regardless the position, and the job is performed often under a lot of pressure, not always highly profitable, and lacks social respect. And many people consider it only as a temporary or additional job. Next slide, please. While working in the branch may give a lot of satisfaction, self-fulfillment, and gives many potential paths of development, it requires greater professionalization of the industry to become more attractive career choice. Here you can see the quote from one of the participants of the project, Jolanta Jurkowlaniec, and it clearly shows what is the general image of work in the gastronomy in Poland. Next slide, please. Moving on to the insights around such good practices as sustainable menu creation based on the local products, seasonal products, or reducing food waste, and in general, waste management. Of course, restaurateurs understand that maximizing the use of food products means not only reducing so-called food waste, but also reducing waste disposal costs. The environmental aspect is also gaining in importance. Supply chain organization, management from central kitchens, storage, processing, extending product shelf life, appropriate portion sizes, advising guests on the amount of food best to order so they don't order too much, using leftovers, appropriate composition of menu, are all the steps taken by very conscious restaurant owners, chefs, and the staff. However, research participants still believe that the products could be more optimally used, and there is lack of awareness about solutions supporting restaurants in terms of waste reduction activities, lack of easy, accessible, comprehensive information on possible practical actions. Additionally, it seems that even through the benefit of using local products is clear and chefs are keen to include them into the menu, sourcing these products from local small producers can be demanding. Smaller producers have problems with liquidity of supplies. Oftentimes they don't deliver and require buyers to travel to get their products. That makes all the supply process and food management more complicated. On the other hand, the cooperation with the suppliers is often connected with huge amount of food packaging, of course, in order to meet sanitary requirements and prevent the food loss, but at the same time, it generates a lot of waste that restaurants must cope with. Last but not least, how to really implement new solutions and see its benefits clearly without measuring it. What gets measured gets managed, and use of information technologies provides the opportunity to collect the data for analyzing costs, revenues, amount of waste, customer behavior, and improving the financial situation of restaurant. There are the systems on the market like Wino or EIT Rising Food Star Orbisk, which is with us today, which help collect the data regarding the amount of food waste in restaurant. And there are other systems, like, for example, that enable automatization of the reservation processes, which gives staff more time to concentrate on the customer service. Yet restaurateurs are still not eager to implement or test such solutions. Those were some of the insights gathered during the research. And now I would like to give the floor to Kasia Młynarczyk, who will share some of the sustainable practices identified by the participants in the project. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Eva. I would like to have a next slide to introduce myself, of course, briefly introduce myself, that I'm a co-owner of Rebread and Handeleg. Of course, Handeleg was the first, and this is the restaurant, a couple of restaurants, and Rebread was made from the challenge of treating the stale, unsold bread, as was mentioned before. So the sustainability mission here and circular economy is the most important part of the business, but also about the product, and that's why I'm one of the participants of this report, and I wanted to share with you 4 the most important from my opinion, of course, also insights that Eva started to talk about. So we will start with the first one. So the next slide will be coming up. Let's start with the products that in our restaurant, in your restaurants, are used the most. And let's make with these products a daily break and a team meal, because this is something that, of course, it's familiar when it comes to restaurants, but maybe if you will introduce it in a culture that we treat the waste as something which is important in our culture when it comes to team, and maybe when we will choose one of the product that it's mostly used in the restaurant, is that bread, it can be also egg or maybe vegetables, and cooperate with a team and the chef to create an everyday meal for our employees or our team, which can be our mission. So this is the first insight, but also a solution that we can, I think, introduce from the next day or maybe next week in our places. So let's have a second one. The second one will be about the team education and about the product and producer knowledge. The first thing which was mentioned also, let's go local, let's go natural, let's go like when it comes to our resources, when they are really next to us, close to us, let's support and build a community among the local producers. But also when we think about the waste, we need to think about not only food, but also about the money, about the time. So we need to optimize this sustainable practices and also transport by putting the local producers, the local community in the heart of the business and the restaurant. This is maybe simple and logic, but what I see is that it's not a common practice for now on. So I think this is something that we all need to take into account. The third one, it's also very important. And the third one on the next slide will be about the management of waste as a material for further use. There is a really big discussion when it comes to the future of waste. What I mentioned a couple of times last month is that we really maybe we will try to treat a waste as something which is good in a taste, but also something which is more sexy than we think that it is. Let's make it more valuable wanted, and let's produce our own menu and ingredients implemented in a meal in our menu. So we can think about these products as something which can be another really attractive thing for the restaurant. For example, bread, as I know, can be recycled as a flour, but maybe also an alcohol, or it can be a soup, or it can be treated as a really valuable product. So start with adding in our restaurant menus some less waste to zero waste options for all of the courses. So from the starter, dinner to the whole menu, breakfast, dessert, main course. It's really possible. And last but not least, when it comes to the solutions, for the next slide, this is something which finally is the most challenging, I think, insight, but also solution, but a really a groundbreaking and open-minded solution. So when we think about the fighting when it comes to less waste and the future of food here, we need to think about the organizations, restaurants, associations as not a competition, but the community which fight for the best all together. So the network here, it's really important thing. We can start with finding other producers, restaurateurs, make them a team, think about what is more valuable in each team, because we can have an offer or many which concentrates on our real resources that we can manage, not all of them. So this consolidation here will be really important, and optimization also. So for example, if the bakery or restaurants is better in a selective menu, let's give a part to other competitors to make the, for example, bread or other ingredients in the menu in a better way with the local ingredients, for example. This is really important to build a cooperation in that mission. So this was the last solution and last insight from our report that I wanted to share.
Thank you both so much for sharing your insights. It's fascinating work, and I encourage everyone to download the report. And also, I mean, I'm sure many of you have been taking notes. There's a lot of great kind of takeaway messages here of immediate actions that can be taken that we'll summarize at the end of this session. But again, lots of food for thought. Now, we're going to move on to the panel discussion that will build on a lot of what we've just heard now. And in this panel discussion, we have 4 panelists from Denmark, from Netherlands, and from Poland. And they're joining us today from their respective countries. And first of all, I'm going to just introduce everyone, and then we'll get to the questions and start the discussion. So I would like to say hello to Jakob Emmanuel Malik, and he is the executive chef with Accor and Orbis Hotel Group, and he is a zero waste philosophy broker. I love this, who has introduced a comprehensive program to combat food waste in the hotels where he's working. And Jakob is a participant, or was a participant, in the direction for the future restaurant work, the co-creative work that we just heard about. And
hello, everyone.
Thanks for joining us, Jakob. Good to see you. Next up, we have Olaf Vanderveen, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Orbisk. And Orbisk is a company employing progressive AI image recognition technology to quantify food waste in the food services industry. And we're going to hear more about that because it's super fascinating stuff. I can see that one of your machines is in the back, so you can see what all of this looks like, and Olaf is going to explain it to us. We also have... Thanks again, Olaf.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. And Katarzyna, she's back again on the panel, and you met her previously in the other presentation, and she is going to provide even further insight based on her experiences. And finally, we have Johan Dahl, and he is our fourth panelist and a project manager at the Copenhagen Hospitality College, which is Northern Europe's largest school specializing in hospitality courses, and it's also Denmark's largest food institute. So thank you, Johan, for joining us as well. It's great to have this diverse panel, different experiences. So Jakob, let's start with you first. You've managed to reduce food waste significantly in the kitchens that you're working with in different hotels. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? Because I'm sure that many of the people listening in are not familiar with your amazing work, and explain how you've done this and what other initiatives you managed to implement since getting started some years ago.
Hello everyone, and I would like to say that in general we started our journey with the food waste like around 6 years ago, and first of all we started to measure it, because I will never manage to do nothing with the food waste if it's not measured. So we started with measuring it. After 3 months we realized it's a tons of food which was wasted. So we decided to change the way we work. First of all, we changed the way we sell actually. So what we offer to our guests. We decided to create the weekly rota for the lunches, to have a compact menu which suits for everyone, from people which like the meat, fish, vegan, all type of the guest. We realize also we throwing away a lot of salads which are pre-mixed. So we decide we go for the rich salad buffet with all the ingredients separately, all the dressings, vinaigrettes. We also changed the way we put the buffet. We did not put the bread on the front. So actually with these steps we went to 54% of reducing the food waste after the 2 years. I mean 2 years because this was actually a quite big journey for us, because to put on board all the cooks, all the waiters, all F&B department was quite challenging due to the fact that I think everything is about the mentality and the education. First of all, the people were scared to put something to the bin, to measure it, to see on the screen that it costs just €4 or €10, or I just put it to the bin. So they were a bit scared of that. But with training and putting on board all the team, we managed to do it. So actually, I think first of all, what you need to do if you want to fight food waste in your place, restaurant or hotel, you need to start to measure it and see from where it comes. Because if you don't know if it comes from, like in the hotel, from the breakfast, from the banqueting, from the restaurant, you will not know where to fight. You can just say, okay, I do the cake from the coffee grinds, and it is great to do it, of course, to use the leftovers also, but you need to first know where is your problem coming. So basically that's it.
And I mean, this is fascinating that you were able to reduce 54% food waste, and I mean, it's really impressive how you were able to do that. So have you kind of rolled out anything else since? And this has obviously been done in different kitchens, but have you built on this? And you talked a lot about education and changing mindsets. That's yes. Not that easy. That takes some time.
I will tell you that it's not easy for sure. This is why I'm participating in different kind of conferences and spreading the the knowledge I just learned in the couple of years. I think it's very important to say and to don't hide my knowledge, because I think if we come together and we fight together this huge problem in the world, we can actually being successful. So even when you have a little hotel, you can do the things. My hotel is one of the biggest in the region. It's 742 rooms. It's 1,400 guests each day on the breakfast, lunch, dinners. So it's quite a big property. But even if you have a smaller property, you can count what is the average consumption of your guests, and with that you can plan better. You can buy the goods better, because you can plan it. You can have your magazine not full of food. You can just have it enough for 2 days, and that's it. You don't need to have freezer constantly on. You can save electricity by using the new equipment. You can track your food waste by implementing the tools that are available on the market. You can do a lot of things. Of course, you don't need to do all in once, because it's almost impossible. But step by step, by creating the also kind of community in your hotel, which are very into the sustainable development, you can do actually a lot.
It's fascinating stuff, and you make it sound very easy, but at the same time, I mean, you also acknowledge that this does happen over time, and that behavior change in the sector is it takes effort. And I think it's interesting too, because you pointed to the fact that measurement is incredibly important, because then you can target your effort. So this is where I want to bring in Olaf. Olaf, you're an innovator, and you are the co-founder and CEO of Orbisk. And this is a fully automatic food waste monitor that can help large-scale kitchens to reduce their waste. So how do you actually change behavior with your device, and how are you collaborating with chefs like Jakob?
Yeah, so indeed, it starts at what's measured gets measured gets managed. What's always a tongue breaker somehow, but indeed, that's the start of a cultural change. But it doesn't stop there. But bear with me. The first thing about what gets measured gets managed is the fact that you have to measure this in the quite hectic environment. That is a hospitality kitchen. I'm quite sure that there's a number of very progressive chefs like Jakob here today, who manages to get his team engaged on the subject and really point out the size of the problem. Luckily, every single chef in the world loves food. And that's why I really love to be where I am today. It's not all about profitability. It's not even all about sustainability. It's about the love for food that you can generally tap into. Nonetheless, the big challenge of getting a grip is the fact that you have to know what happens beforehand. And a hospitality kitchen, especially when there's about 1,000 guests in your restaurant in a single day, a lot happens. So it can only take minimal effort to be embraced. Well, that brings me to the demo of my device real quickly. We outfit the waste bin, any general waste bin. This is mine, but it can be anyone's. We outfit it with our camera unit, and there's a weighing scale below, which I can show you real quick. Right there, there it is. And every time something is disposed, it's a matter of scanning it and disposing it. And within that half a second, we can quantify the type of food, the time of disposal, the amount of food wasted, even the reason for disposal, as we can also see if it's in a pan, on a plate, on a cutting board, or whatever, which tells you a lot about the phase of the process where the food was lost. We quantify this amount of food waste in a dashboarding solution where you can see all the statistics and the stuff on when your food was lost and the reason for going to waste. But it doesn't stop there. And I think that's the most important thing that also Jakob mentioned. Now we've got statistics, but we're looking for means to act. And some people are more capable than others to actually get into this mode. Okay, now I know. So what do I do? And that's the phase that I think we are especially growing in quite considerably. Based on this data, we provide for advice very specific, and we pinpoint what you should be focusing on, because not every chef is a data analyst, like myself. And we connect this data to a number of ways to act, which are public to be seen by anyone. We have an open help center, because indeed I feel exactly like what Jacob said. This knowledge should be shared and not limited to the people that pay me. We link this data, and we provide you with ways to act and how to reduce this, how to rethink your buffet, how to rethink the way you store stuff, and how to rethink the way how you can reuse stuff in other moments of the day, so that you don't have too many ingredients on your menu and still provide for variety in a very creative way for your clients to have a delightful eating experience. All of this combined results indeed in a step-by-step lowering of the food waste amounts in your hospitality kitchen. But in the end, I think it actually enhances the quality of the food too, because there's a lot more attention and a lot more thinking into the way how you delight your customers and how to provide the best food ever while not having too much. We're in the process of also actually connecting this data to your sales, your buying, your guest numbers, and even weather data. Weather's horrible out here, so today there's going to be a lot of winter foods, I would assume. We can also start prospecting the way that guests will eat in your kitchen, in addition to your waste management, but that's yet to come. But this is the way how we help chefs like Jacob, not yet, but we just linked on LinkedIn. But indeed also in the Accor Group and various other the biggest hospitality institutions, both nationally and globally, to get a grip, improving your sustainability, improving your profitability, but in the end also making life easier so that you as a chef can concentrate on what's most important to you, the creative process and the skilled process of cooking, and we'll do the rest.
It's fascinating. Thank you for showing us the demo as well. I think it's really great for people to see this, because often we talk about these devices, but we don't have a chance to see them in real life or online here, as we're doing now, and see how simple that can be. So fascinating. We're going to definitely touch more on the issue of kind of food waste, I'm sure, throughout this discussion. But Katarzyna, I wanted to go to you, because you have developed a circular model to upscale unsold bread at Handelik, which is your restaurant concept in Krakow, and you're processing that into vodka and other products. And I know that some restaurants around the European region are also have similar initiatives. Not all of them, of course, but it's not really a normal practice. There's just a few that are doing so. But how can we kind of normalize circularity in the HoReCa sector? Because it can't just be a novelty, or it can't just be a few in a few countries. But how does this become actually a practice that is accepted and normalized?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Afton, for the introduction, and I will give you just a brief about the rebread. It will be really quick, because you mentioned that circular economy, but how to normalize it. When it comes to rebread, we made it from the challenge with unsold stale bread from our restaurants and delicatesse. So the mission is actually to save leftover bread from being treated as a waste and transform it into valuable products. And on the next slide, you will see just only the solutions that are for now on, and they are, we can say, normalized, but I would say that it's not saving the full value of the products in restaurants and shops and everywhere. So bread waste is treated as a biogas, animal food, agriculture, or utilized. So this is something that I think it's not treated it as a valuable product. And on the last slide, I will show you the process that it's made when it comes to to rebread process. So the bread is collected from the restaurant or from the shop. Then it's stored in a temperature that it's really important here. Then it's cutted. Then it's grinded. And then it's stored in a climatic chamber, and then we can make different processes. Distillation for the alcohol, but also it can be some other processes like cosmetics, packaging for the restaurants, and other valuable products that are now under the research. And this is actually the process here. So as we can say that it's, in our case, it's normalized. But what we can do in other restaurants, organizations, to make the circular economy a really valuable part of the running organization or business. I have here like 4 things. The first one is that associations and restaurants and producers should integrate it into a network. This is something that we mentioned before when it comes to the research of EIT Food and the report, but this is something that I think it's not an idea. It should be really a solution for the next years. Of course, it can be manifests, or it can be rules that should be introduced in restaurants, managing the menu. We mentioned it before today. But the second thing, it's something was already made, because I see that we try to manage the difference between expiration date of the products and the real use possibility of consumption. And this is something that, of course, should be better communicated when it comes to the products. But still, for example, bread here, it's the unique product, because we don't have a regulations actually here. Sometimes there are some tags, price tag with information of the expiration date, but really here I think we can manage it only by look and the taste. And if we see that this is not today's bread, sometimes people are thinking, okay, so this is not a valuable product because it's not fresh, it's not from today. We really need to think differently in that field, make more imagination about that, but also think about the quality of the real products by making the circularity in the daily activities in restaurants. For example, menus, or thinking about the team meals that we mentioned, of course, but also started with home activities. So when we manage our list of products that we buy, and for example, when we buy bread, let's think about this bread for the next days, not like one day only. So it should be normalized in our mind, and then we can normalize in the organization, association, and then we can normalize in other steps. But also, it's something that the first thing is that it's a big challenge that yesterday product, it's a yesterday product, so it's negative more, yeah. And it should be really enormous things needed to be done when it comes to communication, that these products are still valuable. Why they are valuable? What are the ingredients? What are the fermentation processes, for example? So the awareness here, it's something that it's really a milestone that we needed to do. We as I think restaurants, organizations, everything, but also I think that there are reports, for example, from just 2017 at Drexel University research, that people are really willing to pay the same or more for products which are yesterday products. So the upcycle food, for example, also, if the description and price tags and communication will be really showing the value. So this is another thing that should be normalized here. I don't have a really quick solution for that because normalization it's always really a big problem and the challenge. But the communication here and building awareness is something which is the most important. And last sentences. We try to do it in Rebread because we try to communicate it for our clients, for the restaurants, and we try to make new products using also technology, which is mentioned today. And the technology, it will be the very important in the process of the upcycling food, recycle, and measuring the data. And with the first selection of products, so the alcohol, the cosmetics, and packaging, we try to put really emphasis on communication and showing that the technology here, an investment in R&D, in research and measuring data, it's something that it's like, I think, necessary for the next years. And the only thing for the final, I think that we also need to work on a new definition of waste. This is something that should be done. What is really, what is the waste? Is it a waste still? Or is it a valuable product or ingredients that we should think about how to manage it to be more sustainable?
Thank you so much. Again, lots of ideas there of what we can do concretely. You have a model that you are working with, and of course, as you move forward, things will change, but you have an extremely interesting setup that shows that this can happen in real life, that it is happening, and quite inspiring for others. So thanks for sharing your thoughts on normalization. Now, I want to switch to the concept of education and training, because we've been talking a lot about that and its role in change in the HoReCa sector. So, Johan, you've been a project manager at the Copenhagen Hospitality College for over 3 years now. And during this time, the Hospitality College has made some pretty significant changes to its course selection. What are some of the new courses that you've added over the last few years in order to address some of these changes that we've been talking about? And how are the students that move through these courses implementing their new knowledge in the real world and outside of the classroom?
Well, thanks, Afton. I think more so than introducing new courses, I think we're more towards changing the way they learn in the respective courses. So we're still training chefs and waiters and receptionists and hospitality professionals in general. But I think what we're trying to do is to combine, the theoretical knowledge that they need to know with the practical work that they will since go and do in something we call simulated reality. I don't know, it's not the best translation, but anyways, that's what we're trying to do, to give them some spaces inside within the school that are where they train as if they were in an actual, in a restaurant setting or in a hotel setting, or for that instance in a farmer setting or a producer setting, because that's part of sort of the thoughts behind it. And I'll try to explain a little more. I'll just say that it's always very, very difficult in these international settings to compare educational systems because they're so different. And so obviously some of the things that I touch upon are not really, we're not really able to reproduce in other countries because the system is probably different. But what we're trying to do basically is to take our students as much as possible out of the classroom and out of traditional learning, sitting at a desk and watching a slideshow or whiteboard or whatever, and put them into sort of learning situations where they learn and explore with their hands and their senses and their tastes, where they go and visit practitioners and so on, producers, because we think that's the way, we believe that's the way they get the best knowledge, they gain the best skill set possible. That's one big change that we've tried. So we take them out. We have a garden here where we produce not nearly self-sufficient, but but enough to see different varieties and different seasonality, how to do composting, how the bees work, how there's a greenhouse where we do seeds, and so on. So to understand the whole process of where food comes from and how it is produced and what happens to it afterwards after it's consumed. So basically the whole chain from sort of pre-production to post-consumption, also focusing on food waste in the end, and what to do with that, to sort of give them the necessary skill set to take that into the industry where they will since have a career and sort of be an agent of change to some extent, at least. Of course, within, now Krista's not here, he's a brilliant example of how you can work with sustainability in a restaurant setting, but he also needs, or restaurateurs also need, skilled people who can either understand the ideas or actually introduce those questions into the industry. So here we have a fermentation lab, we have a garden, we have a butcher's lab where they learn to cut meat. We have a restaurant where they serve lunch in different teams, serve lunch to other employees and other students. So it's sort of a living lab in a way. And of course, the base of this is of course sustainability, because understanding how you use real and raw ingredients from the bottom up, and we're not able to, if you're a teacher, you're not able to order semi-produced stuff. So you're not able to order bread or mayonnaise or pickles or something like that, because that's also, everything is something that we can produce ourselves at the school in various courses. So now here our production line is that we get whole animals or half animals and cut them. We get raw ingredients that we ourselves turn into sort of the next level and then create into dishes. So we really work on giving the students that we train here the full spectrum of farm to table, or at least understanding where everything comes from and where it goes to after consumption. And I think that well, you ask how that works into, or like what the students are able to do with that knowledge. And I think that here we have sort of a dual system where they spend some time at school and then they go and work in the industry for 6 months or something like that. Then they come back to school for a couple of months and go back to the industry a couple of times. They do this 3 times, and then they're finished. So what they learn here, the higher level of education that they gain here, they can take that into the industry and actually introduce that into their own working environments, if there's reception there. So in that way, we learn, of course, from their experience at the restaurant, but the restaurants also learn, or should learn, from which insights they gain at the school. So I'd say we haven't really changed the courses themselves, because it's the crafts that they learn here are still the same, but we are trying to desperately trying to train professionals and change the content of the training, of the education, to cater to a different industry, a more sustainable industry, and create people who can actually work in that and be part of that change.
That's fascinating. So yeah, changing the model, but not necessarily the content. The content is still relevant, but it's how it's delivered, how people experience that of course requires adaptation. Thanks for sharing that with us. Now I see that there are no questions coming in from the audience in the chat, so I'm going to continue to ask. I have lots of questions, so I'm going to continue asking the questions to our panelists. I want to now go back to Jakob. Just quickly, Jakob. I mean, imagine you're speaking to someone, a young person right now, who wants to work in the HoReCa sector. What would you recommend for them, or what would you tell them how to prepare for the future if you want to take into account these best practices that we've heard about? What would be your best advice for them?
I think, first of all, they need to be prepared for constantly change, because like we saw with the pandemic, you just need to adapt yourself to the changing environment. So first of all, they need to be flexible, agile. For sure, education. If it's possible to catch as much as possible with good education in the school, and if not in the school, just to each day catch something new. I mean, of course, the most important in our industry is to have experience. So as much as possible, catching the experience by working in the different places like restaurant, hotels. So I think this is the most important part. If they want to become a chef, I think the basic is like Olaf said, you need to love food. This is something which is crucial. If you don't love food and you don't love this work, you should not work in this industry because it will be really painful. Yeah, becoming a chef, it's for sure it's a journey which starts with the education towards the experience and finishing by managing and having all this experience, how to manage the people, how to manage the food, storage, all different. And on the end, you need to be, I think, a very good psychologist because to work with the people and to manage the people, you need to know how people are and how they act and how you should address the subjects to them. So I think this is crucial.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to go to a question coming in. This is for Olaf, coming in from our audience, a couple about food waste here. So one of them is from Newcastle in the UK. They find this all that's being discussed right now quite interesting. And one of the questions that they're examining is how the industry internalizes the cost of food waste and how it's contributing to decreasing food insecurity and hunger. Is there anything you can say about that, Olaf?
I'm not quite sure if I fully grasp the extent of the question. So, Diogo, please elaborate if I'm not answering this well. But I do think a side effect of food waste, or a food waste you could see from a chef's perspective who's not as engaged as many of them are, as a soft little pillow which you sit upon, because this surplus of food waste allows you to always have enough of the best stuff always present for every single guest. And this indeed this needs a mind shift. And this has been the status quo for a long time. So basically they have internalized the cost, or at least their buying cost. I wouldn't say they've internalized all of the environmental costs, but that applies to many things in society. So this cost has been internalized, and that's the exact power of it. The fact that there is such a big sum. So say you're buying 100% of which you lose 20% in your waste bin, which is reality often case. There's not an industry that I know that accepts that very well. You know, you throw away 20% of everything you buy just because you want to be certain that everyone gets to eat the good stuff. And the fact that it's been internalized is actually the strong part, because on your bottom line, the moment you reduce this 20% of waste to 10 or even 5 or even lower, then that's bottom line profit for you right there. It's such a big opportunity. So again, I'm not sure if I answered the question of Diogo very well, or if he's indeed referring to the sort of the internalization of societal costs on this, which is a completely different answer. But I think the fact that these costs are internalized, are part of the status quo, is one of the biggest drivers for change.
Thanks a lot, Olaf. Another question coming in too that I think probably Katarzyna and Johan is maybe directed to the two of you, because it's kind of redefining waste in education. And this is something that, of course, is extremely important. Do you think that the academic structure, at least on this aspect, should have a global universality, because every society depends on food and its involvement and has involvement in the wastage? Regardless of the size, I think that all economies have to train their population to minimize food waste. Do you have any comments on that in terms of, I guess, how we educate people? I think that's kind of how we could sum that. How do we better educate people on redefining waste in our societies? I guess we can hear first maybe from you, Katarzyna, and then Johan, based on your experiences and where you're coming from.
Okay, thank you. When it comes to my education, I also put an emphasis to have some kind of insights from the source of Scandinavia. And when I was at my MBA in Helsinki, I was thinking about the education about the food. And I made some research on the schools, and it appeared that, for example, in Helsinki, there are schools from the very beginning when it comes to education. So, for example, these are kids from like 7 years, 8, 9 years old, and they, for now on, they have the classes, they are subjects that are about the food and about the food waste. For me, it was shocking. It was a couple of years ago, actually. And then in that time, I thought that the education and normalization of the education should be from the very beginning, because this is the moment that we are starting to be people, build our awareness about something which is a standard, so the food. And sometimes it's... for example, for maybe not, it's for some people, I don't want to say that for some of us it's too we are too far in that, so maybe it's too late. But I would say that it's really important that we put emphasis for the education from the very beginning, so from the very start when it comes to thinking about the food. And it's possible. I don't know in Poland if it's possible. It's complicated, but when we will try to normalize it in schools and for normal people, not only for the organization and restaurants, it will be really important for the awareness.
Thanks a lot. Johan, do you have anything in relation to kind of the training and an education part of that question?
I mean, I totally agree that this is a question that starts really early, and if you understand sort of if you have access to a school garden, or like if you as a child have been introduced to how something is produced and where it comes from, I think the at the end result is of how much is wasted is probably less. But I think what we're doing at the school here is of course sort of the next step, where I think it's really necessary for the professionals that we train, that they know how to use all the parts of a certain produce or all the parts of a certain animal in order to avoid wasting stuff. Because if you only cook one part, obviously there's going to be a lot of the leaves or the green or other cuts of an animal that will be sort of maybe not wasted in the first round, but at least sort of declassified. And then the less effort you put into, and the less sort of interest you give to these parts, the harder it is. And usually those parts that you cook, that you take as sort of the prime parts, are the easiest to cook. So to be able to use the whole thing of whatever it is, you have to have a skill set that is maybe a little bit higher. And a little bit larger of a reference frame of what you can do with food and what kind of dishes you can create. So I think it's an integral part of what we do, that we teach our chef students and so on to use as much as humanly possible of a certain ingredients, and that's also what we do a lot of sort of vocational learning afterwards, so like courses for people who have been in the industry for years. And that's one of the things that we do a lot of, is to teach people who work in elderly homes and schools and so on, how they can use more and more of certain ingredients. But I agree that that's sort of that's sort of what we can do now for the people who are already trained. But I think that kind of education, as Katarzyna was saying before, it starts very early on from earliest childhood in a way, to understand that throwing away food is such a waste and such a terrible thing to do in a way.
Yeah, thanks. I think again, it's just we're talking about societal change here, and of course, again, it's a retraining, shift of mindsets that we're dealing with, and that really goes back to education. Thanks so much for this, for the discussions on the panel. We have 10 minutes left. So what we're going to do now is go to our polls. On the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see some polls. And the first question is, in your opinion, which area in the HoReCa sector would require the most attention and effort to become more sustainable? So you can choose human resources, supply chains, food waste, packaging and delivery, and dietary shifts. Now, yes, many of you, I'm sure, would agree that we need to change in all these areas, but please choose the one that you think would require the most attention right now, where you would place that attention. The second question is, where do you think the most significant changes to the HoReCa sector will come from? Is it from the top down? Is it from the bottom up? Or is it a combination of both, from the top down and from the bottom up? So we will just let you decide on your responses to the polls and give you a second there. I think here these questions are really relevant to everything that we've talked about today. And if you think about it, we've touched on human resources in terms of education. We've touched on supply chains very briefly, but also how do we reconnect with producers, for example, and that not necessarily being the easiest thing to have shorter supply chains, but that will require further efforts. But also food waste, that has been quite a large red thread in our conversations. Dietary shifts, of course, this is something being reflected in consumer preferences. Packaging and delivery, we haven't been able to touch on all that much. Just waiting for the poll results to come in here. Very curious. And also this idea of, where does change come from? Is it from the top down or from the bottom up? So in terms of that question, where the significant change will come from, so 43% said that it will come from the top down. And we have 0% saying it will come from the bottom up, and 57% saying that it will come from the top down and bottom up simultaneously. So for the other question, the first question, in which area would the HoReCa sector require the most attention and effort to become more sustainable? 12.5% said human resources, 37.5% said supply chains, food waste was 25%, packaging and delivery 12.5%, and dietary shifts 12.5%. So an interesting spread there, of course, very, very much a reflection of the changes that are required and that we see today. So we'll need change on all accounts. Now we have 5 more minutes left, and this is really the time to sum up and then sign off. Well, first of all, I wanted to really thank our panelists, our speakers, for their fantastic contributions. We could have talked forever, and it is always a shame that we run out of time in these discussions. But you can read in their profiles on the webpage about the work that each of our panelists are doing. And if you want to find out more, you can follow up with their respective organizations. But for me, I really wanted to reflect on some of the key insights that I'm taking home with me and that have been shared with us today. So in terms of how we can support the HoReCa sector, we've heard about new restaurant guides that don't just look at, the most delicious food or the most beautiful preparations, but also the ones that are factoring sustainability, different kinds of sustainability. But also we can support the HoReCa sector by assisting in that mindset change that we've talked about. And a really good starting point is to look at how does our society value waste? How do we perceive waste? In terms of educational programs, that's another way we can support the sector. And it's not just for chefs, it's for everyone involved in the sector. And to make sure that employers also support that. Also, we can support in terms of what's on sale, what's on offer in terms of, like we've heard, in the restaurant itself, and how it's being served. So not just what it is, but also how it's being served and prepared. I like also the concept of community, so cooperation between restaurants, not working against each other, but really accepting the fact that this is a larger community. The HoReCa sector exists not just as single institutions, but many actors cooperating together. And if we're going to become more sustainable and move into the future, that we need to do this together. But also valorizing jobs. How do we actually put a value on these really important jobs? When they're gone, when they're missing, we can really see that it has a devastating effect in our countries. I know that, for example, in the country that I live in Denmark, there's a reduction in many people and staff members in the HoReCa sector, and you can really see that. Many restaurants, for example, have low staff right now. And social respect for the professionals. Finally, how do we move from here? Lots of things we can do. Balance the practical and the theoretical in education. Implementation of legal requirements. So how do we actually make changes in legal requirements work for the HoReCa sector and not against it, to make it easy and to incentivize that? Look at digitalization and how that can be a good thing and how that can be used to improve the sustainability of the sector. Also, we heard that data is gold, and what gets measured gets managed. But it's not just about measurement, it's actually action as well. So moving from the awareness that it comes with acknowledging all this data that we can accumulate and actually putting that into action. And some other issues that we've talked about are the circular economy and incentivizing a circular economy, not just talking about it as a theoretical concept, but actually implementing models, experimenting with models that can work over time. So this sums up our session for today. Johan, Olaf, Jakob, Katarzyna, Eva, I want to thank you for all your fantastic work that you're doing. Keep it up, and thanks for sharing all these insights with us today. And for all of you who are listening in, you are now welcome to move to the other breakout sessions. And hopefully you'll be able to reflect and digest all of this information. And if you are either coming from the top down or the bottom up, I hope you implement what you've learned today over time, or at least just one thing that you can take home and put and implement on the ground. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.